I think one aspect of the immigrant piece, at least I think of partly for myself, but also just maybe generally for all those that maybe feel like immigrants, is that there's this sense deeply embedded see that you're always on the outside looking in. You understand that this isn't your country.
Yeah.
You're born here. You're an American citizen, like in Dragon the Bruce Lee story. You're an American citizen, but you're not American.
We want to have children someday.
They'll be American. Linda's American. I'm American.
You're an American citizen. You're not really an American.
No, I know that I'm an American. I know that I'm born here. I know that, and I'm American culture through and through. But this is probably more like the racial, ethnically disparity versus an immigrant type characteristic. But it's just the feeling that when people say you're marginalized, I don't mean that in the offensive way. I mean it just more like you do feel like you're just on the margins always.
Mhm.
The story of race in America is about blacks and whites.
Yeah.
It's about that struggle. So the immigrant experience always feels like you're sort of on the outside looking in. Now, we didn't have a loyalty back to some home country or whatever, but I'm sure there's some immigrants here today that may have that dualism of feeling like, do they really love America, or do they still love their home country? What does assimilation look like or whatever? We didn't have an option. We had to assimilate, like we didn't have any like heartfelt loyalties back to our home country or anything. Don't have a country. But because of that feeling like you're always on the outside looking in, I noticed that a trait within the immigrant mentality is that if you don't really feel like you're part of it, then there's this mentality that like you do right by you and your family and your people.
Mm.
And you accept the notion that you're just swallowed up by this bigger entity that has unlimited funds, unlimited power. So you do you to get by. And there's whether that means like, because I know a very immigrant mentality in the elders is always like cut corners, or, they don't perhaps follow all the rules to a T on certain things because they just feel like they're just making it. They're
Yeah.
just making it by. And so they don't know the ramifications of certain things. They don't understand the concept of how serious the numbers need to be on my taxes or whatever, because
Mhm.
it's like, oh, let's just cut corners, like it doesn't matter. It's us and then that government there. And that's hard to, that's so impossibly hard to understand or empathize with or feel if you've never been in that position,
Mhm.
because I mean, but the only way I can look at it is if you just really plucked yourself out of your scenario, dropped yourself into some foreign country, and then just figured out how to make it, and you're just kind of given some means and you figure out how to make it. Only then will you feel like, yeah, you learned the language, you learn how things work there, but your real heart isn't there. You're just doing whatever rules that place does because that's what you're supposed to do to get by now. But you don't feel a true loyalty, like a true like, and it's not because love that country or whatever. Maybe you can say I'm appreciative of this country or whatever it is. But that's what it feels like to be displaced, though.
Yeah.
That's the whole sensation of what it means to be displaced. And so, and it's relevant for a lot of the hot topic conversation today happening in Minnesota, the national spotlight for a lot of the immigrant Somali community right
Mhm.
now. That's the story there. And that's the sense I get from that. The sense that like there's a big demographic of people here who like are just here to do what it is they got to do to get by. And if it means taking more or doing whatever, it is what it is, because there's not a true like, well, that's not right. There's a loyalty to sort of like doing right by the country or your fellow citizen, but there isn't that fellow citizen mentality in a lot of in certain immigrant populations.
Yeah.
And so there isn't that fellow citizen, and even for me, it took a long time to understand what that fellow citizen meant, like, because we're just trying to make ends meet with our own little subculture here. And so wrestling with that fellow citizen mentality has always been difficult for like mom and dad, for these elderly immigrant communities. And so that's why they feel like if they need to cheat to get away with to make theirs, their ends meet, they'll do that. And that's not justifiable at all. But it's just like you always feel displaced.
Yeah.
And that's like, But you got to figure it out. You got to figure it out though, because the common theme that people have been talking about this week with immigrant is
Talk more on it.
is assimilate. Well, what's that mean though? Because I thought that's a fancy, or that's something I kind of pondered too. Because with the Somali community being under fire right now for wide rampant misappropriation of funds to these communities, and they're so community knit and community based, and then you see documentary or footage of people going into these communities saying, let's talk about things. And all of them are like, no, I don't speak English. And they're all insular, very insular. That's the extreme version of that lack of a fellow citizen type thing. So when someone says, if you're going to be critical and say, well, there's this population of people here and they're misappropriating the funds or whatever. But even if they're not misappropriating funds, but they're just still using the funds, but they're on welfare and they're still using the funds the way they're intended to be, what does assimilate mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And when you said misappropriate the funds, you're probably speaking specifically regarding all the controversy,
all the
the
recent findings,
scams, the things that were coming up and so forth there, and the fraud.
Tim Waltz and all this stuff. National headlines, man. It's
I mean, for me, that's just straight theft.
Yeah,
that's not even misappropriating funds. That's just them stealing and taking.
They found a loophole.
It done
They
whatever.
allowed it to happen.
Yeah,
and it's just
that's what I mean by the extreme version of a true loyalty to something else that's not the entity that you currently actually live in.
Yeah,
it's just I'm gonna do right by either my family or my people or whatever. And so I don't know enough about the funds being remittances that are going overseas, but
me, I can't even hate on the Somalian community, even regarding that, because honestly, it was given to them. Yeah. If it's gonna like, hey, I'm gonna set up this thing called Feed the Children, I'm gonna set up this thing that's gonna fix this or fix that, and then you have like the state going, oh, here's millions and millions of dollars. Great. Do you need more? Okay, I'll take it. I think the big problem really is like we need to really take a closer look at exactly how state tax funding is really going into these communities. Like, and there's got to be a real investigation and holding people accountable. If you were involved in that shit, you're either fucking deported or you're going to jail, And we're talking about holding the real people who are involved with misappropriating that shit, Because until that happens, then I feel like the Somalian community is going to take the blunt of the hit, and which is sad, because it's the old saying, like, shit always rolls downwards, and that's the way nature goes. And it's unfortunate that, and the last thing I want happening is children in the Somalian community, especially because they're innocent. They're just trying to, like, we grew up in that immigrant life. They don't know what anything better. They're just trying to live like here, like anyone else. But they're going to take the racial, the racism and the hatred in that community simply because there were some bad apples, but also at the same time, it was the way the system fucked up, of just handing money over and over again without having any accountability to it and just splurging on whatever the hell it is. And that's what's going to happen. And then I think that if whoever is involved with that all the way up to the top, it needs to have some real accountability and some real investigation to take place. And until that does happen, then like some people are gonna take the blunt, and that's not fair,
There's when this topic came up again, it's good because we're Minnesotans and it's good to know how our funds are being used. And it does strike a nerve in you to say, man, what the hell? Like, tax paying dollars are going to, and such a huge amount to just people's pockets. Like, it's just such a huge amount. It's not like, $10,000.
$4 billion.
Yeah, it's like so much
so far.